Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to this special Devex webinar, Improving Rural Access Through ReCAP, Lessons Learned from 6 Years of Strategic Research. My name is Richard Jones, Editorial Director at Devex, and I'll be guiding you through this conversation today. Now, for the past 6 years, Cardno Emerging Markets UK Limited, our partners for today's webinar, has operated the Research for Community Access Partnership, or ReCAP for short. Now, this program has been funded by UK Aid to support applied research into low-volume rural roads and transport services, and that's across 12 different countries in Africa and 5 countries in Asia. In short, ReCAP has aimed to strengthen the evidence base on cost-effective and reliable low-volume road and transport services, and subsequently influence policy and practice. Now, this coming Monday, September the 14th, will mark the official end of the ReCAP program. So today, we're going to take an opportunity to reflect on the challenges, celebrate the successes, and learn a little bit more about lessons learned and takeaways from 6 years of strategic research on rural community access. We'll also hear more about the official launch of the Life of ReCAP program report that you'll be able to download later today. Now, during this hour-long conversation, we'll first hear more about the origins of ReCAP and the rationale that the UK Department for International Development, now of course the new Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO, had at that time 6 years ago for investing in rural access research. We'll then focus on insights and key results from ReCAP's researchers and transport access experts, as well as learning more about ReCAP's contribution to the 3 strategic pillars, that is access provision, access preservation, and access services. We'll also learn how ReCAP developed road research centers in partner countries to maximize the value of its research, and we'll hear why engaging with academic institutions is more essential than ever for groups looking to influence multilateral organizations and the broader global development agenda. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers who come from a variety of geographic backgrounds and play a variety of roles within the ReCAP program. We're delighted to welcome such a knowledgeable group to share their expertise and lessons learned with us today on rural transport and access issues. So I'd like to first welcome Anne Jocelyn, Infrastructure Advisor, Growth and Research, part of the Research and Evidence Division at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO. Welcome, Anne.
Thanks, Richard. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Welcome.
Great.
We're also pleased to welcome Dave Runganaikalu, ReCAP Program Director at Cardno Emerging Markets UK. Now, drawing on 20 years of experience, Dave has delivered a large range of complex international development programs across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, and we're delighted to welcome him today. Hello, Dave.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, very much happy to be here and sharing experiences. Thank you.
Great. Now, we're also pleased to welcome Dr. Annabelle Bradbury, ReCAP Deputy Team Leader and Transport Services Research Manager at Cardno Emerging Markets UK. Annabelle manages high-profile technical research projects in Africa and Asia and specializes in socioeconomic development in the transport sector. Annabelle, welcome.
Morning.
Good morning. We're also delighted to welcome Nkululeko. I'm sorry for the bad pronunciation of your name, Nkululeko Letta, ReCAP Deputy Team Leader and Infrastructure Research Manager based in South Africa. Nkululeko is an experienced road and infrastructure engineer, and he's responsible for the identification, formulation, and management of a series of research projects. Nkululeko, welcome.
Thanks, Richard. Good to be here.
Great to have you. We'd also like to welcome Joseph Howler, ReCAP team leader in Tanzania. Now, Joseph has extensive experience in the road sector with an emphasis on policy, planning, institutional reform, road management, and financing. Joseph, welcome.
Hi, Richard. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. And finally, if we're all present and correct, we'd also like to welcome Caroline Visser, who's a ReCAP Knowledge and Communications Manager based in Switzerland. Caroline's worked in the road sector for over 20 years and is responsible for refining, disseminating, and sharing ReCAP research outputs. Caroline, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Looking forward to today's discussions. So a big welcome to today's speakers. Now we're all acquainted. And before we get started, a few housekeeping issues from me. If you have any problems hearing today's speakers or viewing the presentations that we're about to watch, please send a message using the Q&A chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. One of my colleagues on tech support will assist you. Likewise, if you'd like to pose a question to our panelists, please feel free to submit one using that same Q&A chat box, and we'll get to as many as time allows during audience Q&A. And finally, there'll be a recording of today's webinar, and the presentations will be sent to you, the registered attendees to this webinar, together with a copy of the Life of ReCAP report, which is going to be released later today. You can also join the conversation online, and hello to viewers watching via Twitter and LinkedIn. You can join the conversation on social media, tagging the handle @Devex and the hashtags Devex event and hashtag rural access. So that's hashtag Devex event and hashtag rural access. We'd love to hear from you, so please do get in touch, have your say online, and submit your questions for today's panelists. So first, I would like to turn to Anne from the SCDO to open the conversation. Anne, welcome again, and over to you to set the scene for us today.
Thanks, Richard. For those who may have noticed on the agenda, we had listed Mark Harvey, who is the head of profession for infrastructure for the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO as we're now called. Unfortunately, Mark wasn't able to join us this morning, so I am speaking on his behalf, and I'm just having a slight, okay, there we go. My computer was having a slight meltdown that was making my notes a little bit difficult to access, but it's cleared itself up. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about the history of ReCAP and why what was then DFID at the time chose to support ReCAP. Now, many of you will know that ReCAP evolved or was born out of the predecessor programs of CCAP, or Southeast Asia Community Access Program, and AFCAP, or the African Community Access Program. Both of those programs were highly successful in promoting rural roads research and transport issues. If you look at some of the global figures, and these are up to date, they're not from the time when we made the decision, but some of the global figures are things like transport is the second largest sector globally by lending volume for the 8 multilateral development banks. And that accounts for about $20 billion on average being lent each year. In addition, it's normally in the top 3 spending sectors for our partner country governments, particularly in low-income countries. And yet, there's not a lot of research done on what is most effective in our partner country situations to make that lending volume as effective as it can be. And so the UK government at the time decided to invest in building on that evidence. And in the case of ReCAP, really building the strength of the research community in our partner countries. So that was really where ReCAP came from. And why we're quite proud of it, because it's been able to do that. It's been able to then take that evidence and work with the policymakers in these 17 countries to help improve policy, to improve transport infrastructure and transport services for rural transport and rural roads. So Mark wanted to talk a little bit about some of his experience in countries where ReCAP has been operating. You know, he mentioned countries like Afghanistan, where he helped to facilitate ReCAP engaging with MRRD and the NRAP program. He said, he talked about Ethiopia and how fundamental the work has been there, and talked about the early work in CCAP and AFCAP. But he says that most memorable for him is the work in Nepal, where the Rural Access Program has much relevance to ReCAP, and RAP is one of his favorite all-time programs. So I'll leave it there. If Mark is able to join us by the end of the program, he might have a couple of additional comments. But I just want to say, in wrapping up, congratulations to ReCAP for all of the work that you've all done, and for the Life of ReCAP document, which is a great record of some of these fantastic things that we've been able to deliver. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks very much, Anne. And as you say, we can come back to the FCDO's Mark Harvey if he joins us later in the webinar. But for now, I'd like to turn to Dave Ronganaikalu. Welcome again, Dave, and the floor is yours to kick us off with the presentation segment of this webinar.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard. Yes, in terms of ReCAP, Anne actually comfortably did a good summary there, so I'll try not to repeat. But yeah, on the side of ReCAP, we've been in existence since 2014, some 6 years in operation. And we built on research experience that has been exercised in Asia and Africa previously. So we're basically a continuation of the FCDO's research efforts in the rural transport patch. But just, yeah, more in a nutshell in terms of what ReCAP's all about. Basically, the premise is to improve rural access across Africa and Asia, and specifically looking at it from a research perspective in terms of providing better links to rural communities and transport to better their livelihoods and economic benefits. But we look at areas, this is just very brief because it's quite an all-encompassing program, but we've covered areas such as rural road resiliency, providing appropriate transport services, which also looks beyond road safety and motorcycle safety, for example, but we also have looked into areas, for example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the Rural Access Index, which my colleagues will elaborate further on during the proceedings today. Next slide. In terms of investment, ReCAP itself is a £28.5 million program, of which 23 million of it is specifically for research. And we've basically committed all of that, and about 95% of that has been spent, with some projects now just coming towards the end and just some residual expenditure really left in the program. So it's been very highly subscribed and well used over 6 years. But I think something that's more important to actually what this program has been able to offer in terms of its investment support is where the partners have come in. In that I'm talking about the development partners, for example, the likes of the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, and the EU, the national governments that we're working with, the road funds and road development agencies. Collectively, they've contributed some £26 million over and above the support that ReCAP has invested into the program, which has basically shown basically an acknowledgement of that research and further investment to further advance on that research in terms of development of infrastructure and transport services across the countries that we support in ReCAP. Next slide. In terms of actual geographical spread, it's quite a large cover in which 17 countries across Africa and Asia have been supported by the program. 12 of those covered in Sub-Saharan Africa, in which we've got cover in some Western African countries, Central and Eastern Africa, and some of the Southern countries. And in Asia, although it took a little bit more time for them to get engaged in the program, we have seen some good successes across the board, in particular in recent years. So the likes of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar have seen some good strides in terms of the research that's been offered to them and been able to actually move forward with actually implementing guidelines, support, and policies to drive their rural transport agendas. Next slide. Now, my colleagues will elaborate more in terms of the life of ReCAP and the experiences to date, but just some key information in terms of our achievements. Over its life, some 56 policy documents and counting have been produced by the program, and these basically are guidelines, manuals, technical briefs, policy support, guidance, and various other types of documentation and information that have guided our partner countries to further develop their rural transport agendas, and have actually been applied, as shown in the next point. Close to 631,000 kilometers of rural roads have basically been influenced or / impacted by the research that's been compiled by ReCAP. Basically, the guidelines, support, and manuals that have been produced have actually had an influence in terms of the government planning, development partners' investment, and contributing to that large amount of contribution that's resulted in close to 631,000 kilometers worth of support and furthering of the research that's been covered under ReCAP over its life. In addition to that, ReCAP itself is over its years has become more and more of an influence in terms of becoming a global partner in influencing the rural transport agenda and influencing its development. Just to give you some examples, to date, some 44 papers and articles have been produced by the program that have actually been published in internationally renowned publications and have also been presented at international conferences. So the name is getting out there and the work is getting out there. And ReCAP research itself has been cited, and again, still counting, in at least 115 times across the academic articles that have been produced under ReCAP over its life. And just lastly, in terms of impacts and achievements, we have what's called a rural access library, of which 1,500 pieces of documentation are actually contained in that. All the manuals, all the tools, all the instruments, all the policy guidance, briefs and notes and whatnot are contained on that. So there's a wealth of knowledge there, which from a sustainability and legacy standpoint, we're aspiring to continue as we identify a host that will further update and maintain that database so that practitioners and development partners around the world can learn from this documentation and be able to further it beyond the life of ReCAP. So as I said, just a very brief synopsis about ReCAP, and my colleagues will come in further in terms of what we've achieved. But that's it for me for now. Richard, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dave. A recap of ReCAP. That was great. Thank you very much. I'd now like to give the floor to Nkululeko in South Africa to talk about ReCAP's contribution to the so-called 3 strategic pillars. Nkululeko, thanks so much for joining us, and handing over to you.
Thank you. If I can have the slides running, please. The next one. Okay, thank you. With respect to the 3 pillars that ReCAP is targeted. I will talk through the provision and preservation pillars that underpin the work that we have been doing over the years. The sort of relevance or the importance of rural roads for economic and social development in rural areas cannot be overemphasized. And that's why the research is really targeted cost-effective provision of rural roads to ensure that there is access across the communities that live in the rural areas. For some time now, conventional wisdom has been that it is uneconomic or not cost-effective to upgrade roads to sealed standard if the traffic levels are less than 200 vehicles per day. But ReCAP research has proven that once you target the use of locally available materials, which are a bigger cost element of provision of roads, then you are able to use them in an innovative manner and also using innovative design approaches. You can actually seal roads cost effectively, even if the traffic levels are less than 100 vehicles per day. So, and also further to that, there are old roads that were also built using these low volume or these locally available materials, which by conventional specifications would be rejected. And these roads have been performing very well and even accommodating higher levels of traffic than envisaged. So this research process, what we call back analysis, has provided even further evidence that a lot more can be done to apply locally available materials to enhance the level of access in the rural communities. And we know that the majority of the population there depend on good access to markets and public goods. So ReCAP research is really targeted a provision of this rural road network that is fit for purpose and that is specifications that are appropriate for the level of access that is required. So in that respect, the effort has been to produce guidelines and manuals that would incorporate this research so that countries and practitioners can include them in their design processes and implementation so that the benefits can accrue to the communities and also to the roads agencies and governments that provide funding for such investments. So all these manuals and guidelines, a lot of them have been national guidelines, which the countries themselves have identified and prioritized. And we allude the success of the embedment and uptake that countries have taken up to the approach that ReCAP embarked on, which is demand-driven approach, starting from the identification, prioritization, and implementation of research projects, and then the production of these manuals. So these manuals also cover aspects across the board, from planning, pavement design, geometric design, road safety, materials, construction technologies. So once those are now embedded as policy in national programs, and the next step really is to ensure the correct application of these innovations and methods. And that can only be done through the training workshops and dissemination processes that allow practitioners to get a good handle of how these approaches can be effectively applied in their own environments. I also want to mention that some of the requests that come, they are not necessarily just national, but they come from all partner countries and even those that are not partner countries. So we've had also to respond to that by developing manuals or guidelines or notes that address issues raised by various practitioners. Or a prime example is the Rural Road Note that has or that aims to address the applicability or the application of various pavement design methods for low volume roads that are available out there, and to guide the practitioners on which ones would be applicable in various circumstances in their design processes and application, and this to enable them to sift through the noise of some of the methods and be clearer on which methods apply where. So we think that is a very important document that has just been produced, and training has also been conducted on the contents and on how that is being applied. So capacity building is an important aspect of this embedment and correct application, because it is pointless to have an innovation that is incorrectly applied, because you will not accrue the full benefit of it. So I'll talk a little bit more on the other aspect of capacity building in a later presentation. Again, talking about resilience of rural road networks. We know climate change has had a very disproportionate impact on Africa and Asia, and ReCAP research has also addressed that by producing climate adaptation handbook and associated guidelines with all the components that countries would require to address this very important aspect that impacts pretty negatively on rural access in particular. And we have been fortunate as well to be involved in the PIAC Climate Adaptation Technical Committee, where these manuals will feed into the development of a framework, climate adaptation framework that countries can apply, and we feel that is one of that could really be one of the wide-ranging impacts of ReCAP research across the global framework. So that is something we are working on with PIAC, and the refinement of this framework is ongoing. There are issues as well, of course, with policy gaps that still exist in the countries for addressing climate change in the transport sector, and ReCAP had intended to take that further on, and we are yet to see how we can mainstream these climate adaptation approaches in policies and plans and capacity development aspects in each of these countries. And we know that climate adaptation is a long-term country commitment, so it needs to be well-founded and well-embedded so that it can be taken through in the process. So just touching on preservation side of things, I would also like to touch on that a bit later, but we have developed a practitioner's guideline for preservation of the rural road network, focusing, we're trying to broaden this aspect from just road maintenance, but to include asset management that covers a wide range of things. And this guideline that we've developed, we call it the GEM guideline, advocates for use of simple and appropriate tools and indicators to improve, to measure improvement or deterioration in the condition of the road network through also self-assessment by various road agencies, asset valuation, which gives a clear indication of whether your asset is deteriorating or is increasing, or asset is increasing in value or decreasing in value. And other indicators like the road sector serviceability index, which looks at how the policies and funding and sustainability are addressed or are achieved to enable sustainable development of the rural road network to happen. So the life cycle, whole life cycle approach as well is a key element of sustainable preservation of the road network and the use of high-tech solutions as well for measuring road condition. It all comes through if a road asset management approach is taken. We believe that would ensure sustainability of all these processes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nkululeko. So capacity building, cost effectiveness, resilience, lots of information there for our audience. Thank you very much. I'd now like to pass the baton to Dr. Annabelle Bradbury. Annabelle, a warm welcome again to you. Over to you to continue talking about ReCAP's contribution and some high-profile results.
Richard, and I'll be looking at the access pillar of the research. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Evidence shows there is a strong correlation between poverty and connectivity, and improving access to rural transport services is vital to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN pledge to leave no one behind. In spite of an increasingly urbanizing world, a third of the global population is still estimated to be living in rural areas by 2050. Access for rural communities means the ability to reach healthcare, education, services and employment, and crucially enables the movement of agricultural produce between small-scale farms and markets located in villages, towns and cities. The first mile refers to the route taken to move produce between farms and the nearest collection point or motorable road for onward transit to the market. And movement of produce along the first mile is often undertaken in small quantities by head loading or motorcycle due to the lack of accessible road infrastructure. And this affects the volumes of produce that can be sold at market, and also means there's a high incidence of crop damage and wastage that can affect food and income security. So research into first mile connectivity was undertaken in Tanzania and Kenya, and a cost benefit analysis of improving first mile access indicated that improvement of first mile roads to an accessible standard is economically feasible. And the research showed that reducing the length of the first mile is correlated with reduced transport costs and increased farm incomes by nearly 5%. An associated study explored how investments in low volume rural road construction and maintenance affect the provision of rural transport services and the mobility of people and goods. The purpose of the research was to examine the conditions in which transport services succeed or fail, and the relevance of infrastructure condition and level of service to that outcome. So the interactions between low volume rural roads infrastructure and transport services were investigated in Nepal and Tanzania, and these resulted in a set of guidelines for a more integrated approach. Next slide. Sorry, previous slide. And the one before that. Thank you. So a really interesting phenomenon is the exponential increase in motorcycle use in Africa, which accounts for 80% of passenger and small freight services in ReCAP countries. Motorcycles are often used as taxis, with riders charging a fare to carry passengers or goods, and they play a crucial role in connecting people to services and farms to markets. And they're commonly found on the most commonly found vehicle often on rural roads and tracks because they can travel off-road and provide a door-to-door service. In some countries, the use of motorcycles to carry fare-paying passengers is illegal, but not always enforced, especially in rural areas. A project on enhancing our understanding on safe motorcycle and three-wheeler use for rural transport and the implications for training and regulatory frameworks was undertaken in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Ghana, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Motorcycles were found to be especially important for maternal health-related trips and also provide employment and support agriculture. However, they have been criticised for creating safety risks for other road users and have been linked to increased crime, abuse towards passengers and riders, and other health issues. An instructor's manual for training motorcycle taxi riders and a separate manual for motorcycle and three-wheeler taxi associations have been developed, and over 250 riders have been trained already using these materials. And a policy paper providing options for changes to the legislation on the commercial operation of motorcycles in Ghana has been presented to Cabinet, and a bill is scheduled to be debated in Parliament there. Next slide, please. Gender equality, equity and social inclusion have been important cross-cutting research themes within the research programme, the ReCAP programme. Rural transport infrastructure and transport services can have significantly different impacts on men and women. And ReCAP launched a gender mainstreaming research initiative comprising 7 projects exploring various aspects of gender mainstreaming in relation to rural transport in Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Liberia, Sierra Leone and Nepal. And the initiative explored a variety of challenges for women within rural transport, including time constraints related to unpaid care work and associated transport burdens, women's lack of voice in decision-making processes, and the perception that road construction and transport services operations are a male domain unsuited to women. So lessons from that research have been published in a special volume of the Institution of Civil Engineers Transportation Journal, and guidelines for mainstreaming gender in rural transport have been developed and are already being actively used by partner countries in line with their own gender and equity policies. And gender has been an integral part of ReCAP's own strategy for implementation, with over 50 female researchers having participated in 50 ReCAP supported projects at a senior technical level since 2014. Next slide, please. ReCAP has been working in partnership with the World Bank to develop, propose and obtain agreement on a harmonised approach to measurement of indicator 9.1.1 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the Rural Access Index. And this is defined as the proportion of the rural population who live within 2 kilometres of an all-season road. The original RAI data and methodology dates back to 2006, and in 2016, the World Bank proposed a new way of measuring it based on geospatial techniques. So the RAI is now calculated by overlaying 3 layers of data in a geographic information system. These layers are rural population, road network, and the all-season status of the roads. In other words, roads that are motorable all year round, except for short interruptions due to inclement weather. And ReCAP undertook a study to produce a more accurate, repeatable and sustainable way to measure the Rural Access Index and to scale it up to more countries. And supplemental guidelines to the methodology have been produced, which contain procedures for calculating, documenting and the publication of RAI for a given country. And they include accessibility factors that determine the likelihood of a road being all season based on surface type, climate and terrain features. Next slide, please. The RAI measurement tool, which you can see the homepage of on the slide, was developed as part of the research and displays the Rural Access Index for all countries globally on an interactive geospatial map based on 3 open data sets. to identify the locations of rural population and the all-season road network. It compares in-country data with open data sets for 3 sample countries in Malawi, Nepal, and Myanmar as well. And the tool is intended to be used by countries to compare geospatial data with in-country data, enabling more accurate reporting of the RAI, and also to be used as a planning and prioritization tool for rural development. And next slide. We're pleased to say that SDG indicator 9.1.1 has been reclassified to tier 2 as a result of the ReCAP research, which signifies the Rural Access Index is conceptually clear and has an internationally established methodology. 34 countries have measured RAI since 2016 using the geospatial methodology, and there is a policy guide and roadmap in place to support the World Bank and UN agencies to achieve tier 1, the highest tier in the SDGs, by 2025, and that will signify that data is being regularly produced for 50% of all countries. The community of practice for the RAI will continue to exist through a task team chaired by the World Bank's Transport Global Practice, and the UN will provide a collaborative environment for the RAI measurement tool on their digital global platform. This will enable countries to accurately estimate where populations are currently not connected to an accessible road and where investment may need to be prioritised. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Back to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Annabelle. So we heard there, gender mainstreaming, rural transport, leaving no one behind, first mile access, so many important concepts there. Thank you very much for walking us through that. I think we're running a little bit behind, so I'd like to now turn back to Nkululeko, and later we'll go to Caroline Visser to talk us through ReCAP's strategy to maximize the value of research. Nkululeko, if I can encourage you to keep it as short as possible, so that we can leave some time for audience Q&A as well. Thanks, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I'll be short, thanks. I've already talked about the demand-driven nature of ReCAP research, so I will not dwell on that. Also have to say that this has underpinned the high levels of uptake and embedment of research, of ReCAP research. I also want to mention that what also underpins sustainability of the research from our perspective has been the strategy to establish and enhance the road research centers in all the 17 countries. A few of them had these research centers even before ReCAP, but most of the countries did not have such an institutionalized research implementation framework. So this has been one of the key elements that has ensured that research is sustained, and that a strategic approach to identifying, prioritizing, and implementation of research themes and projects has been embarked upon, and critically, this helps to secure sustained funding and implementation of research projects into the future. In terms of capacity building, this has enabled a structured way of providing this capacity building for the young researchers who are motivated now, or who can be attracted, motivated, and retained because they can see a career path with an institutionalized setup. If anything, I think the research caps, if you like, ReCAP, AFCAP 1 and ReCAP, they have raised the profile of research among countries, and I think this has been a very big achievement, and this can be seen from the way that the countries themselves have meshed UK aid funding pound for pound, or slightly exceeded that, because they now see the value of the research that they are carrying out, and they've also managed to leverage funding from development partners through the implementation of programs within their countries. So I think this has been a success factor for the institutionalization of research and the raising of the profile of research. And obviously, research has to be carried out by competent personnel, and a structured training and mentorship program has also been instituted that continues as we also close up the program. And furthermore, the training of trainers approach as well has ensured that training can continue beyond ReCAP, because trainers that are identified from local training institutions are identified, and they are trained, and they can also continue to train others within the country into the future. So we believe the institutionalization of research has been one of the great strides that the program has taken to ensure sustainability and sustainability beyond ReCAP, and to ensure that all the benefits of research, because all the documents that we've been mentioning, the manuals and guidelines, will need to be updated with more evidence into the future. And this can only be done sustainably through local research centers, local personnel, and in a structured manner. So I think that has been a great approach. I will not go into much detail on some of the detailed training that has happened, but we've had training on the manuals themselves, on innovations that have come through in terms of design approaches, and this has also enhanced the cost effectiveness and sharing of knowledge among practitioners, not only within the countries, but also across the board. So I think I'll end here and allow for my colleagues to make their inputs as well. Thank you.
Nkululeko, thank you very much for that intervention, training the trainers, sustainability, continuous learning. Caroline, perhaps we can turn to you. Thanks so much for joining us. And staying with you, I understand that you're going to walk us through collaboration and influencing the multilateral agenda before we hear from Joseph. So Caroline, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I would like the next slide, please. And the next. So, yeah, please. Thank you. So I will be briefly speaking about some of the platforms and assets we put in place to disseminate and manage ReCAP knowledge in our wider strategy to maximize the value of our research. So one of the primary building blocks already referred to by Dave is the Rural Access Library, which is an online repository available on the ReCAP website containing over 1,500 knowledge items generated from the ReCAP program and predecessor programs. So it's a true clearinghouse of knowledge, and it's freely accessible for transport research community to consult. And meets with international repository standards. So it's, for example, registered with the Directory of Open Access Repository, which is an international quality benchmark. As the program is coming to an end, we're currently in the process of sourcing a future institutional host for the repository to keep all this knowledge alive. Some other assets that were developed in the framework of our research includes the back analysis database, which was already briefly referred to by Nkululeko, which contains historic data on the performance of low volume roads. There is software for pavement design based on the DCPDN methodology. And there is a benefit assessment system that has been developed to rate the qualitative return on transport research for the partner countries that we work with. Next slide, please. So one of the issues we came across in the program is that the pool of very senior experts in transport, rural transport and infrastructure was declining and aging. I mean, people retire, and with that, their invaluable accumulated experience risks of being lost. So we launched a project that looked at retaining this tacit, undocumented knowledge and map it, document it, and package it for future generations of researchers to access. And one of the key outputs of this was a series of filmed interviews, packaged in films centered on themes such as the provision and design of low volume roads, climate resilience, inclusiveness of rural transport, and road safety, just to mention a couple of themes. We've also been developing knowledge maps to see where people can find certain knowledge. We've identified gaps that could be addressed by future research programs. And we've also drawn up profiles of these very senior experts, and everything is readily available on the ReCAP website. Next slide, please. A key strategic component for the dissemination and uptake of ReCAP research is constituted by online learning, and particularly relevant in current times of the COVID-19 pandemic, imposing all kinds of restrictions on person-to-person interaction. So after extensive scoping through a dedicated project, ReCAP undertook a pilot development and implementation of 2 online learning modules. One was about proficiency testing schemes for materials testing, which you can see the front page on the slide. And a second course was addressing climate resilience and adaptation of low volume roads. So these courses were developed by the University of Birmingham, and they were piloted in collaboration with some national partner institutions in Ethiopia and Bangladesh. The underlying principle of these courses were that they were developed as an open educative resource. And that means that the content of these courses will come available for anyone or any institution to use, to adapt, to contextualize to local circumstance and embed it in their, integrated in their training and curricula. The pilots have seen very high numbers of enrollment, and were highly appreciated by those who took part in them, we're happy to say. Next slide, please. Yes, so I will be taking you into our next section of the webinar, which is about collaboration and influencing the multilateral agenda. Next slide. So we have put much effort in reaching the right people with our research evidence. So the decision makers with the influence over research allocation and use in rural transport and the research sectors. And we've done so through building coalitions in making the case for rural access research. We reached out and brought our research community together through our own events. We called these the inter-regional implementation meetings, and we had 2 editions of those, one in 2017 in Uganda and one in Nepal in 2019. Both of them had over 100 participants from 24 countries, and these were really gave a ripple effect into broader policy and practice collaboration between those countries. We've furthermore been present at many an international transport and research conference to share the outcomes of our research and to establish strong links with the transport research community globally. Next slide, please. We've also been able to participate in international partnerships and high-level international transport-related meetings to ensure that rural transport is on the agenda at the multilateral level. A key platform was provided by Sustainable Mobility for All. This is a World Bank-led consortium of over 50 major transport stakeholders advocating for a radically different approach to transport in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. ReCAP was involved in the Universal Access Working Group responsible for rural access inputs, and this was co-led by FCDO. And we also contributed to the Global Roadmap of Action towards Sustainable Mobility, which was launched last year. ReCAP is currently serving as a representative of civil society in the Sub-Saharan steering group. We have collaborated with the FCDO sister program on high volume transport research in 2 editions of the Transforming Transportation conferences organized by the World Bank and the World Resource Institute. With the UN Commission for Regional Development, who is the convener of the annual Environmentally Sustainable Transport Forum, we've established strong collaboration to advocate for rural transport and research in the Asia-Pacific region. We've organized various side events and key interventions during the EST proceedings, leading ultimately to the adoption of, in 2017, of the Vientiane Declaration on Sustainable Rural Transport. And this is really a commitment by the EST member states to rural transport for the long term. We've also had regular interventions at the biannual Asian Development Bank Transport Forum, of which the most recent edition took place a month ago virtually. And we've established collaboration on the Africa continent with the World Bank-led Africa Transport Policy Program. We organized the first edition of a special technical session on sustainable transport, built on the EST Asia example last November in Zimbabwe. I just wanted to mention these collaborations to demonstrate that these opportunities provided excellent platforms to feed research evidence emanating from programs such as ReCAP into the global policy discourse on sustainable transport. With that, Richard, I would like to hand back to you.
Many thanks, Caroline. Time is short. We want to get some audience questions as well. But first, I wanted to turn to Joseph to walk us through ReCAP's training efforts and engagement, in particular with academic institutions. Joseph, over to you, and as brief as you can, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. I will be speaking on update and embedment. Over the program period, ReCAP has managed to stimulate uptake and embedment by involving various stakeholders. Just to give you an example, in Ghana, for instance, the University of Cape Coast, and in Malawi, the University of Malawi, have incorporated the rural transport services training in their curricula. The University of Birmingham lecturers use materials that have been produced by ReCAP in their undergraduate and postgraduate programs. AMFA, which is an association of road funds in Africa, their members have decided to adopt asset management methodology in their operations in order to ensure that roads are sustainably being maintained. In Tanzania, for instance, as a policy measure, the regulatory authority has approved the motorcycle training curriculum for training of motorcycle drivers in Tanzania. In Bangladesh, for instance, ReCAP has assisted Bangladesh to produce a planning and prioritization tool, and it is soon to be rolled out countrywide using Asian Development Bank project known as the Rural Connectivity Improvement Project, and it is hoped that this tool will impact around 150,000 kilometers of roads. ReCAP has assisted Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology to establish a center for Sub-Saharan African transport leadership. This is going to be a regional home for cutting-edge transport research in Africa. It is expected that in the future, the center will be transformed into an international hub for transport professionals in Africa. Next slide, please. Next one. Oh, sorry. Yes. Now, what we have learned over the course of ReCAP implementation of ReCAP research philosophy is that many countries or research investments tends to lean towards physical infrastructure. So we are recommending that partner countries should try as much as possible to balance between research investments in infrastructure and transport services. We are also recommending that countries must involve transport policy agencies instead of just working with the physical ministries responsible for physical works. With respect to greening mobility, ReCAP has produced a number of documents, particularly climate adaptation handbook and the guidelines, but there is a need of going beyond the handbooks by linking up green mobility, low carbon transport, encouraging reduction of greenhouse emissions, etc. And here we're just giving an example that the trialing of an electric motorcycle is a good example of how green mobility can be implemented by our partner countries. Gender mainstreaming is now a political discourse in African partner countries, and some countries have already nominated gender focal points, and this is a good thing. We also, the other issue which is also very important is the rural-urban divide. So here, we have noted that due to rural-urban migration, globalization and urbanization, there is a need for research to link between rural and urban. And we, within ReCAP, we have carried out a study on first mile that has tried to link up, to provide a link between urban and rural transport. And we think that partner countries should also take this lesson on board. Lastly, ReCAP has been acknowledged as a leader in rural transport and infrastructure. So ReCAP outputs that has been generated over time, as has been mentioned before by my colleagues, they have great impact on our roads, and hence now it's up to the partner countries to continue collaboration between institutions rather than on a program basis, as it has been currently with ReCAP. Next slide, please. So the report on the life of ReCAP can be found on the link that you can see on the screen. And with those few remarks, I wish to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And for our audience, we will be sending a copy of that report together with a thank you note. And I believe that the report is also available at the ReCAP website. I'll give details at the end of the webinar. Now for some audience questions. We will rattle through as many as time allows. I think we are almost at time, so we'll have to keep answers as short as we can. Everyone, please. A lot of questions coming in about resilience. Maybe I could direct this one to Annabelle. Just in terms of how ReCAP's dealing with increased phenomena such as storms, flooding, extreme weather events. How is this affecting rural areas? How is this affecting things like road safety, climate resilience issues when it comes to some of these exposed rural roads? Annabelle, and then whoever wants to chime in.
I think maybe this one actually is for Letta, for Nkululeko, sorry.
Great, Nkululeko, over to you.
Yes, okay, thanks for that question. I think that's a very important question. And as I've alluded to in my presentation, we've produced guidelines for climate adaptation, for how countries can address climate adaptation right across the board, from identification of vulnerability and threats, to change management in terms of the policy framework within countries for implementation, to engineering adaptation, as well as a visual assessment and stuff. So what we have done is production of those manuals, and as you'd be aware, those guidelines were developed through trialing in 4 countries with diverse geographic circumstances. And what we were planning to do in the next stage now is to ensure that the policies are in place and countries are assisted to incorporate some of these within their road asset management frameworks, because that's where we believe the implementation of these measures to enhance the resilience can be done consistently and in a structured manner, because as it is now, it's being applied on an ad hoc basis, depending on who is doing what, and then they can extract elements that they believe would assist them. But we believe it has to be a holistic approach, and it has to be part and parcel of a roads asset management policy.
That's great. Thank you very much. And now another audience member points out that an extension of the ReCAP program is currently under consideration, and asks, if that extension is granted, what does the future look like for ReCAP? What are the main areas of growth and research? Perhaps, Dave, I could turn to you first, and then we could move to Anne, if you would, if I can put you on the spot there for a few words from the FCDO perspective.
Okay, I'll go first. As you mentioned, Anne will be able to elaborate a little bit more on that. It's obviously from the policy standpoint and the donor standpoint, she'll be able to have more robust information. But yeah, there is scope currently for of an extension of some sort, and we are in the process of going through the administration and discussions in that respect. Those invited to this webinar, and obviously more publicly, will be communicating something during the course of next week. So stay tuned for that in terms of what sort of shape and scale the extension will look like. So just kind of get you on the edge of your seats for now, and await further news from us next week. But Anne could perhaps further elaborate a little bit more from the FCDO perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I was going to ask for a minute at the end, Richard, but I'll do it now. And first, this is a little bit out of line with the question, but I'll take 20 seconds to say that I see Liz Jones is on the call, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize that Liz was really the driving force behind ReCAP. And so I want to say thank you to Liz, and I know many of you have worked with her in the past. As for the question about the extension, I didn't want to contradict what Richard said at the beginning, but I think you'll, as Dave has just said, you'll be pleased to hear that ReCAP will not be closing on Monday, but we are still finalizing with ministers how long we'll be able to extend it. So as Dave says, watch this space. We will be in touch. If on the note of rural transport research, I think it's still, regardless of how long we can extend ReCAP, rural transport research is still very important to the FCDO. And so we will be looking at how we can shape a program in the future and what that might look like. I think it's fair to say that would need to align very closely with climate research, climate resilience, and that sort of thing, and with economic growth. But I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Anne. And we hope to hear more updates in the near future on devex.com. Caroline, perhaps I could turn to you, since we are out of time, and producers are shouting in my ear to wrap up here. But maybe you could give us your sense of what you're going to take away from today's discussion, the expertise that we've gathered today, and also what our audience can watch out for in terms of the report that's going to be released later today. And perhaps you could give us some short concluding remarks.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Richard. I think the end of this webinar couldn't end more positively with the news we just received. So that's really great takeaway. I just want to thank the audience for having spent the time with us. I think what we've tried to do with this webinar is to demonstrate or to put on display what the program has achieved over the 6 years of its operation, from the various perspectives and strategic pillars that we built the program on. And I hope this was deemed useful by the audience. Much of it is contained in the Life of ReCAP report. So a copy to this new publication will be available shortly on the ReCAP website, and also we will disseminate the recorded version of this webinar to the people who might have not been in the opportunity to attend. So I think that would be my wrap up, Richard.
Thanks very much, Caroline, and many thanks indeed to all our guests today for your thoughtful presentations and responses. I definitely urge you to visit researchforcap.org and download a copy of the program report released later today. I've had a sneak preview. It contains a number of contributions from many of today's speakers, some striking imagery as well, and some nice case studies from Africa and Asia. I'd just like to give a big thank you to Anne, Dave, Joseph, Annabelle, Nkululeko, and Caroline for joining us today. And thanks to you, our international audience. I think it's been a really valuable insight into strategic research around roads, transport, rural access. And it's great to hear such a wealth of experience and lessons learned from this sector from a first-hand perspective. So thank you very much to our speakers. To you, our audience, have your say on today's event on social media using the hashtags Devex event and rural access. And as Caroline mentioned, we'll be in touch soon with a recording of this webinar together with a copy of the presentation and a link to that Life of ReCAP report. In the meantime, thanks again for your time today. Stay healthy wherever you are, and all the best from Barcelona, from myself and the Devex team. Thank you very much.